It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
And I think, yes, that's right. It's time, ladies and gentlemen, for another Conduit for Action quiz. This week's quiz, as we go over to Conduit News, is on ballot issue number 5. To raise the minimum wage or to not raise the minimum wage. Last week, Conduit News Radio host, me, broke down the 5 ballot issues that will appear on your ballot in November. And you can watch the video right there. You see it on the screen. Beginning this week, Conduit for Action will issue quizzes leading up to the November 6, 2018 election that will highlight each of the 5 ballot issues. These quizzes will educate on the specifics of the ballot measure and its potential impact on the state. So let's get started, shall we? All right, so Joe, welcome back to your face on the screen there. I see it. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about this. Let's go ahead and get to question number 1, shall we? Hello, Joe.
Should we talk first how stupid of an idea this is, raising the minimum wage?
Your bias is just, it's just seething right now. Yeah, it is. It's a really stupid idea. Going to be terrible for small business. Going to be bad for the people that they're claiming to help. But I just don't know if a lot of Arkansans understand that. It's a very nuanced issue. Question number 1, what is the current minimum wage in the state of Arkansas? Is it $8, $8.50, or $9 an hour?
$8.50.
$8.50, okay. Question number 2, under issue 5, what would the new higher Arkansas minimum wage be on January 1st, 2021? $9.50, $10.50, or $11?
It's $11.
$11. Question number 3, what is the highest state minimum wage in the United States? $11 New York, $11.50 Washington, $12 California.
I'm pretty sure we talked about this on air.
We did, yes.
I'm pretty sure it's Washington.
Okay, you're going to go with Washington. Question number 4, under issue 5, what would the new higher minimum wage be on January 1st, 2019? Okay, would it be $9.25 per hour, $10 per hour, or $11 per hour?
I think it'd be going to 10 January 1. So yeah, I'm going with 10.
Okay. Question number 5, under issue 5.
I now take back my previous answer. It's $9.25, and then it's going to go into 10.
Okay. Under issue 5, what would the new higher minimum wage be on January 1st, 2020? $9.25, $10, or $11?
Because it jumps to 11 on January 1, 2021.
Right.
So, okay.
Well, that, according to your logic.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So those are the 5 questions. Then you ask, you put your town in, and you sign up for the emails if you want them, and then of course we run it. We say okay, and we decide whether or not Joe. What did Joe get? He got 100%, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, congratulations, Joe. That has got to be your first 100% in, I don't know what, a long time,
yeah,
right?
Because I usually miss the mark by 1 question. I almost did it again.
Hey, it's available. It's available right now over at conduitnews.com. Right there on the front page, it's conduitnews.com. You can take the quiz. You can share it with your friends. Joe here making 100%. I'm so proud of you, Joe. I'm so proud of you. I just think this is great. Yay. Yes. All right, so let's see here. That's the Conduit for Action quiz. Where do we want to go with this next? Oh, let's talk a little bit about this other story up at Conduit News, term limits in issue 3, okay? We've mentioned this, we've reported on it, but I feel the need to report it again because I do know out there in the audience, we've got a lot of people that support term limits and making them stricter, making them go from 16 to 10 years. We also have people out there who are fans of the show and disagree, with me on, because I think it's a good idea, but some people out there just, hey, I respectfully disagree, and I respect you guys who disagree. Now, there's some people that can't disagree respectfully, but anyway, that's unfortunate. So anyway, the term limits initiative lacks signatures. The initiative to shorten legislative term limits is missing the required signatures to appear on the November 6th ballot. To appear on the ballot, change makers needed to submit 84,859 valid signatures for the initiated constitutional amendment. The Arkansas Democrat Gazette reported that Special Master Mark Hewitt concluded that the proposal did not have enough valid signatures, with over 14,000 erroneous signatures in the final count. Next, this finding will go before the Arkansas Supreme Court. So, I mean, that's an awful lot of signatures that are going to, that they're throwing out. 14,000 erroneous signatures. I mean, that's an awful lot. But I will tell you this, and this may make some of you upset, but it is obvious that people at the Marble Palace who are in office don't want this, okay? I mean, there are politicians that have great voting records that don't want a shorter term limits. And there are politicians that have terrible voting records when it comes to limiting government that obviously don't want this. I mean, let's just be honest about it. This is a unifying issue when it comes to people on all sides of the political spectrum. They would like to stay down there longer. And you can make reasoned arguments for why that's the case. But the skeptical part of my brain here is going to – I'm just not surprised. I'm not surprised that something is thrown out, issue 3 term limits is thrown out when you have an issue that the entire apparatus of the Marble Palace agrees that we don't want shorter term limits. We want longer term limits. That's not a surprise to me, because when you have that kind of consensus, again, whether you are a liberal, whether you are a Republican who is really a liberal, that you're hiding out as a Republican, but you're really a progressive, whether you are an actual conservative. I'm sure there might be some conservative legislators out there who think 10 years is long enough, but the bottom line is this. Most of them are all in agreement that shrinking the term, for whatever reason, you can make a reasoned argument. Some people might just be, some people might say, you can't limit me to 10 years. Then that's a shorter amount of time that, it's going to take me at least 11 years to figure out how to steal money from the taxpayers. That's just me being cynical. But anyway, there's mass agreement there. So it's not a surprise that they've essentially thrown the term limits initiative off the ballot, but the Supreme Court will make the final determination there. Now, did I read somewhere where the same master, or whatever this arbiter is, the same guy said that the minimum wage, though, gets to stay on the ballot? Is that correct? Yeah, Conduit News has this story as well. Joe, can you go to the front page of Conduit News and then click on it's on the front page, minimum wage initiative to appear on the November ballot. The proposal to raise Arkansas's minimum wage will remain on the November 6th ballot. Court officials found on Monday that the initiative met the amount of valid signatures after being allowed extended time to submit valid signatures. It was found that the Secretary of State's office had mistakenly discarded some of the submitted signatures needed to certify the ballot initiative. Next, the fighting will go before the Arkansas Supreme Court. If found to be valid, voters will decide on November 6th if they want to increase Arkansas's minimum wage to $11 per hour. Can you imagine what that's going to do? Can you imagine what that's going to do to Arkansas small business? It's going to be absolutely devastating. I think it's going to be devastating. I don't think people understand how bad it's going to be, but people are going to vote for what they perceive as their own interest. And there's a lot more people who work for small businesses than there are small business owners that actually, what we're going to have here. And this is really, if you really think about it, how immoral is it that you're just going to let other citizens dictate how you do business when they don't even own your business? It's almost like voting on the minimum wage is essentially saying that people who don't own your business own part of your business, because now they get to dictate. If you hire me, then you're going to have to pay me this much. I mean, it's really kind of like a weird, sick way. It's like a backdoor unionization, backdoor union. Like, we're a backdoor union state because we put this on the ballot and somehow collectively bargain, but using the government and their guns to do it. You will pay $11 an hour if you're going to hire somebody. It's really immoral. I mean, these potential workers don't own a business. They don't know what it takes. They haven't gone out and done that. I mean, that's not to say that every worker doesn't know what it takes, but you get my point. There's just because, you may be making $11 an hour right now, and somebody else is making $8.50. If it raises to 11, that doesn't mean that you're going to go up $4. That doesn't mean that you're all of a sudden going to be making $14, $15 an hour because now, this other person that was making $8.50 is now making 11. That doesn't mean that. But a lot of people think that it does. This means less jobs. It means eventually inflation. It means higher rent. There's no more prosperity generated. You're not richer. If you're a fast food worker making $8.50 an hour and now you're making $11 an hour just because of some edict, you're not richer. You know who's richer? The government's richer because they get to tax you more. They get more money off of the tax revenue. But you're not actually richer. The country in itself is no more prosperous. And everything catches up. Rent catches up. Food catches up. All of it catches up. And it catches up very quickly. The phone number is 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. Liberal, progressive columnist Max Brantley of the Arkansas Times, folks, has apologized to Senator Brian King. That's right. Max Brantley wrote a story, Routine Corruption in the Arkansas Legislature. And at the end of the story, now he's talking about, this whole article is about Joe Jett, the shadow Speaker of the House. It appears, at least you can make the argument, you could certainly write a nice book on this, that State Representative Joe Jett paid Jeremy Gillum $16,000 so that he could be the puppet master and pull the strings about what really took place, what really happens. I mean, I'm just saying, that's what it looks like when you give somebody when a Democrat gives the Republican Speaker of the House, loans him $16,000 and then gets a prominent spot as a chairman of the most powerful committee in the House. I mean, is Joe Jett the shadow Speaker of the House? Has he been the shadow Speaker of the House this whole time? Apparently, if you make any suggestion, to that point, then you hate friendship and you're against legislators being each other's friends. Oh man, that's some pain point politics that's easy to see through, isn't it? If you question my integrity, you're against friendship. Okay, all right. So this is a really good article here in terms of, from a leftist perspective, highlighting the cesspool that is the Marble Palace. Now, at the end of the story, though, Max Brantley issues an apology to Brian King, or at least it used to read like that. Hang on a second. I owe praise to Senator Brian King, defeated by Bob Ballinger in the Republican primary this year, for a sometimes lonely voice in favor of more ethical government. I thought that said apology originally, but hey, I don't know. So I could have been wrong here, because I don't specifically remember if Max Brantley said, I apologize to Senator Brian King. But anyway, now at the very bottom, it's at the very bottom of the article. Now it says, I owe praise to Senator Brian King, defeated by Ballinger in the Republican primary this year for sometimes a lonely voice in favor of more ethical government. His manner wasn't designed to win friends like the amiable Gillum and Joe Jett. He could be a bully, Max Brantley writes. I thought he was dead wrong for his opposition to government medical programs for poor people, but he sniffed out bad actors. At U of A lobbying way station payoff for Senator Johnny Key before his elevation to education czar, where he now looks after the Walton agenda. Martha Schaffner, the corrupt state treasurer in the GIF scandal, in which dozens of legislators gladly served unconstitutional pork while leading legislative audit. Much of what we know today about government rot is a byproduct of Senator Brian King's work. That's Max Brantley saying that. I think that's fantastic. You see, when Brian King was the chairman of audit, things got done, things got exposed. But when Asa Hutchinson became governor, Brian King was no longer the chair of audit. They made sure that never happened because he was getting to the bottom of this. Now, one thing, Max Brantley, when he says, I thought he was dead wrong, let me see here. I thought he was dead wrong for his opposition to governmental medical programs for poor people, okay? Well, the reason he wasn't dead wrong about his opposition for Medicaid expansion is because of the amount of people, and I wish Max Brantley would just say this. I wish Max Brantley in the Arkansas Times would dig in, because it's a very, very easy hit against the other side, and I against what he would consider the enemy, which would be Republicans and the Republican Party platform. But it's one that they've committed, and I don't think they should be shielded from it. Democrats were honest back in 2012 and 13 about their support for Obama and Obama's Medicaid program. Republicans in 2012, however, decided to campaign vigorously against Obama, Obamacare, and specifically Medicaid expansion. Well, how do you get a Republican to go against what they were campaigning to do? You have to pay them, apparently. And that's very obvious. If you look at the amount of healthcare lobby spending, the increase, you can even go to the most recent Follow the Money report that was released yesterday by Conduit for Commerce. It's clear that the kingmakers are these healthcare interests, and they want to keep a $2 billion a year program going. And that is a huge story. Everyone wants to ignore it. But the fact is, the Republicans that campaigned against Medicaid expansion, not all of them, but enough to get the job done with the Democrats, it appears they were paid to change their opinion after they got elected. And that is why Brian King was against this, because he knew all of this was going on. He coined the phrase the Medicaid Mafia. And boy, wasn't that ever accurate. Because then when you chart all of this to Rusty Cranford, it unlocks an entire brand new Pandora's box, where it's now a federal scheme that encompasses a lobbyist he tried to kill in New Jersey. You have the preferred family health care in Missouri. You have the former U.S. attorney in Oklahoma who was a lobbyist. I mean, it's a big, big national scandal. And Arkansas politicians, Arkansas politicians were being bribed for all of this. And we still don't know the extent of how many Republicans were being bribed and how many Republicans' votes were being bought by laundering the money through this consultant or that consultant, and where it ends up. We still don't know the end game here. It's a big story. You can go back and you can find story after story and even audio clips of people being against Obamacare Medicaid expansion, and the Republicans had big legislative victories because of that. But then, guess what? Governor Beebe, the Democrats, and a minority of certain Republicans, and those are the ones who made the initial votes is the ones I would cast, and some of the ones that came along after the fact. Congressman Bruce Westerman said, don't trade your vote. In 2013, he was a state rep, and he said on the House floor, don't trade your vote for what? 30 pieces of silver. People were so mad at him for saying that, but you have people saying that they were offered bribes. That's the thing. And if you're going to start any government program, Max Brantley, whether it's from good intentions of helping the poor or not, I mean, we could debate the merits of that. But when you're having to pay the politicians to change their mind, that's a recipe for disaster. That's a recipe for disaster. We got to take a break. Back in a moment.
If you believe the Second Amendment protects your right to defend your home with a firearm, where do you turn if the government confiscates your gun? To the courthouse. The Founding Fathers created your Seventh Amendment right to a civil jury to protect your freedoms. The courthouse is where you fight the overreaching hand of government, and the Brad Hendricks Law Firm is where the fight starts. Call the Brad Hendricks Law Firm at 501-221-0444. The Brad Hendricks Law Firm in Little Rock, standing ready using the Seventh Amendment to protect your Second Amendment rights.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed roller lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Been closely tied with the Communist Party leaders in China for decades because of his business dealings. So, I mean, really, this is the person who really should have left office a long time ago. Dianne Feinstein at this point is absolutely ancient and just so entrenched in the swamp that it's a
Yeah, and I saw where even Ruth Bader Ginsburg was talking about how hyper-partisan the confirmation process is. And, we've really seen that. I mean, if you go back, a couple of decades, this used to be a very bipartisan process where you had people getting confirmed 90, with 90 yes votes. And now the margins are so thin because there are clearly two different philosophies on how to, interpret the Constitution of the United States, Brian.
Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Here's just a little news. We don't have a lot of time left in this hour, but everything is building to a fever pitch because of the Senate Judiciary Committee in D.C. and the testimony of Christine Blasey Ford and Brett Kavanaugh later today. We have yesterday her attorney releasing a polygraph report. Details are different, though, from other times she has recounted the story, and it's revealed that it was administered in Maryland, even though she recently delayed testifying before the Senate, citing difficulty with flying across the country from her home in California. Michael Avenatti has decided to make his client Julie Swetnick available for media, has declined to make his client Julie Swetnick available for media contact, which is why the New York Times now says they can't corroborate her story. Judge Kavanaugh has testified under oath to Senate investigators in response to Swetnick's allegations. GOP Senators Tom Cotton and Lindsey Graham declared that Swetnick's allegations are not credible. President Trump dissed Avenatti on Twitter and apparently got under his skin. Jeff Flake trashed President Trump. Let's see here. Trump lambasted Democrats in a press conference for holding back allegations after confirmation hearings. They know it's a big fat con job, he said. And then NBC running with a fourth accuser story from an anonymous letter claiming somebody's daughter saw Kavanaugh molest another woman in 1998. Back in a minute.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
That was my driver that was working for the Chinese government. Until the FBI told me. I swear I didn't know. But so Dianne Feinstein, she sits on this letter since June, and then the report that I read, Brian, said that the FBI, she referred it to the FBI. That was the headline, but the FBI says, we're not investigating this. Now that the accuser has come forward, I wonder if that might change.
Well, now, when you have this Jeff Flake kind of situation where you have a couple of Republicans, I mean, it does seem like it changes the dynamic. But you're absolutely right about Dianne Feinstein, one of the least trustworthy people in the U.S. Senate, not just because her driver was a spy for China, but that her husband, Richard Blum, has been working, has been closely tied with the Communist Party leaders in China for decades because of his business dealings. So, I mean, really, this is a person who really should have left office a long time ago. Dianne Feinstein at this point is absolutely ancient and just so entrenched in the swamp that it's a
Yeah, and I saw where even Ruth Bader Ginsburg was talking about how hyper-partisan the confirmation process is. And, we've really seen that. I mean, if you go back, a couple of decades, this used to be a very bipartisan process where you had people getting confirmed 90, with 90 yes votes. And now the margins are so thin because there are clearly two different philosophies on how to, interpret the Constitution of the United States, Brian.
Well, sure, one party wants to flush it down the toilet. That's their interpretation of the Constitution. There are two different ways of looking at it. One side values it and the other doesn't. So that's the bottom line here. But we are living in ridiculous times, and news, the fake news media has become more absurd than ever. But I mean, at some point, this is going to come back to haunt them because they're going to have a Democratic president, and who's going to want to confirm somebody to the U.S. Supreme Court, and they've opened the door for a lot of shenanigans here. So,
well, I'm just, I don't know what to do in this situation. Like, I don't know. Do you go ahead and have the vote anyway? And what are they going to do if you did? I mean, you talk about meltdown mode. And again, the American people, I think, see through this for exactly what it is. And I think they think this is absurd and ridiculous.
Look, this is a numbers game. It's about counting to 51, and that's the bottom line. If Jeff Flake or somebody is not going to vote, Susan Collins especially, if they come out and say, I'm not voting for this, then the thing, that it's effectively dead because you don't have the votes. So, well, the other issue, though, are the Democratic senators from red states. And how they're going to vote. But look, if they have Jeff Flake and other people providing cover for them, they'll go ahead and know as well. So if you don't have 51, then there's no point in proceeding with the vote. So Republicans the leadership doesn't have that much power over this. It all depends. But someone like Flake, we can't get rid of that guy fast enough.
Yeah. Okay, so if in fact this is now stalled and delayed, what does that mean about the midterm elections? I mean, that's got to be a motivator for those of us on the right to get out and vote.
Well, that's why our group, we have created a new super PAC called Red Wave America, and we're actually intervening in these races because we're so disgusted. Because our members, we have a group called Stop the Scalpings on Facebook. We have 111,000 members there, and they asked us to become more activists in nature. So we created a group, which you can look up our page on Facebook called Red Wave. Just type that in one word.
Yeah, you broke up there, Brian, a little bit. You broke up there.
Yeah.
Red Wave,
Sure. So we have our new group, Red Wave America, and you just use the @ symbol and look us up on Facebook. So we're intervening in some of these races because, look, the left is trying to take down Ted Cruz in Texas with one of the sleaziest candidates they've put forward in a long time, this guy, Beto O'Rourke, who pretends to be Hispanic but isn't, and who's Irish American but pretends to be Hispanic with a name that's just a nickname that, he made up. So I mean this is the kind of what we're facing in 2018. This is ridiculous.
Brian Maloney, I appreciate it. Editor-in-Chief, MediaEqualizer.com. Go there now for some great stories and great insight. Brian, it's always great to have you on and to have your analysis. I appreciate it, sir.
Thank you so much.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the program. This is hour number 2. You've found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality, where we are building a liberty machine. Hey, welcome back to the program. We have the president of the Family Council, Mr. Jerry Cox, is back on the line. Jerry, it's always great to have you on, sir. Good morning.
Well, it's always a pleasure to be on your show. Thank you for having me.
Tell us, Jerry Cox, about this big announcement. I've seen it in the press. I've seen it in the press releases. You are doing a 30-city tour, right?
Yes, we are. In fact, we're launching it next week in Pine Bluff, and we are going to travel about 3,000 miles, and we're going to visit 30 cities around the state of Arkansas to tell people how bad Issue 1 is, how bad the so-called tort reform amendment really is. And so my staff and I are going to fan out all over the state of Arkansas, and we're having free breakfast in one town, and then we're headed down the road to the next town. We're doing a free lunch, and we are covering 30 cities, 3,000 miles in about 15 days.
That is, that's going to be a lot of work, but I mean, you know, we are almost a month away from the November 6th election, where people are going to have to decide whether or not they think the, you know, Issue 1 is something that's a good thing. I mean, I think it's a terrible idea. I know you think it's a terrible idea as well. I see here in the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, you know, they talk about, you know, visiting church groups and things like that. What is the, you know, what's the attitude like among, you know, church-going folks?
Well, I'll tell you what, any group that I've sat down and visited with gets it, because you just lay out the facts. There's good tort reform, and there's bad tort reform. Issue 1 just happens to be really bad tort reform. And I can't help that. I didn't write it. It was written by lobbyists for the nursing homes and other big corporate interests, because they don't like getting sued when they mess up and they hurt little people. And so if you want these big corporate interests to be shielded from lawsuits when they hurt a member of your family, then I'd say go ahead and vote for Issue 1, because that's exactly what it does. And when you explain that to people, people say, well, that's not right. That's not fair. It tips the scales of justice against average people. It shields these big, bad actors out here, and we don't want to do that. So we need to vote against Issue 1. And so that's the message that we're taking to the people of Arkansas. But more importantly, we're going to do our best to meet with the newspapers in these small towns around the state, because people read those papers. They're an important news source to people that live in small towns. And if it's a weekly paper, it'll lie there on the coffee table for an entire week. Mm-hmm. And so we want to get the message out as best we can through these local papers around the state as we travel and do these events.
Some of the, you know, some people who are for this, you know, Republicans who typically consider themselves to be pro-life, they've had a problem with, you know, Family Council and you, Jerry, and others. Rose Mims from Arkansas Right to Life personally opposes Issue 1 because it's not pro-life. And that, you know, to a Republican who supports Issue 1, they think, oh my gosh, I'm going to be called. So how is that being received, and how beholden are you? I mean, when you talk to people, do you bring up this phrase of being pro-life?
Well, it certainly is a human life issue. There's no doubt about it, because it puts a price tag on human life. It says that if a big corporation kills a member of your family, it caps the non-economic damages. And if that's a child, if that's an elderly person, if it's a disabled person, then those are the only damages you can probably collect, and so it caps those. So it does put a price tag on human life. It devalues the lives of these people that don't have an income, what the Bible would maybe call the least of these. And so I told some people the other day, I said, whether you call it pro-life or you call it something else, it doesn't change the content of issue 1, and it doesn't change the effect of it. So rather than to get out there and squabble about whether or not it's a pro-life issue, I'd rather just say, you know what, call it what you want. It's a human life issue. I'm convinced of that. If you want to call it pro-life, I'm with you. If you want to call it something else, I'm with you, as long as you're against issue 1. And that's the important message that we need to get out.
Yeah, and, there's also an important aspect of this is to look at incentive. And if you're a nursing home and, you have practices that eventually, every 100 patients or so, or I don't know what the ratio would be, but you're going to have a situation where the nursing home is messed up. They have neglected somebody. Well, if they get sued and they lose, that is incentive for the nursing home to attempt to correct the behavior. But if it's capped at $500,000, these nursing home owners make a whole lot of money. Now they can just factor that in as the business model, as a cost of doing business.
That's exactly right, and that's exactly what they will do, because nursing homes are for-profit enterprises. About half of them here in Arkansas are owned by one man, and so he's making boatloads of money. Well, his people are out there lobbying the Capitol, the lawmakers, every day during the legislative session, and their fingerprints are all over issue 1 because it helps his bottom line. He can cut back on services, even cut back on food if he chooses to, I suppose. But certainly cut back on staff, make more money, and not be worried about being held accountable if just a few old people die. I mean, what's that? It's just another number on the bottom line, I fear, to some of these entities. And so it's not just nursing homes. It's reckless trucking companies. It's industrial polluters that pollute the creek behind your house. It's racist companies that practice racism in their policies. And you try to sue these people and hold them accountable, and you're going to hit a brick wall out there, and it's called issue 1, and it's a cap on the damages that they have to pay when they do something really bad. And that's just not fair, because under our current system, if somebody hurts you or a member of your family, you can take them to court and plead your case to a judge and a jury, and they decide, based on the merits of that case, your case, what the damages ought to be. If issue 1 passes, you're going to have a one-size-fits-all cap that applies to every case before it ever happens, and they're going to say, we don't care about the facts, we're just going to allow this much, and that's the end of it. And again, that's not justice, and it's not fair, especially to people that are not lobbyists, that don't have a team of lawyers on staff all the time. Regular folks depend on this as a way of getting justice, and it's guaranteed under the 7th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. And I'm afraid that these ads that are on TV are tricking people into voting away their constitutional rights.
So how are they tricking people? What are some of the things that these ads are telling folks that are not true?
My goodness, they're saying, oh, vote for issue 1. It'll bring jobs to Arkansas. And that's the tired, old, worn-out line that people use for everything that they want to persuade you into voting for it. It's vote for this, it'll create jobs. There's absolutely not a shred of evidence that this is going to create even any jobs whatsoever. And we've looked at other states that have passed laws a little bit like this, although this one is more far-reaching than any state law we've been able to find anywhere. And we can't find any evidence that tort reform like this created any jobs. There are other factors that create jobs. May I say, like a better tax structure, like Texas has? May I say, like less government regulation? Amazing. Imagine that. But that's not what they're trying to do to create jobs. They're rolling this thing out here, and they're packaging it as a jobs creator, when in reality, It just protects these big corporations
Yeah.
from lawsuits when they hurt somebody.
Yeah, and you know what? Even if it did, I mean, I know it doesn't, but even if it did create jobs, at what cost? You know, and it's the cost of the most
exactly
vulnerable.
right. That's exactly right. And I've said this: even the people like these big corporations and companies that Issue 1 is designed to help, they have an obligation to do what's right for their neighbor that it's going to hurt. And the Bible is very clear about justice, and especially justice for the poor. And it says very clearly in the book of Proverbs, don't take advantage of the poor just because you can. Don't take advantage of the poor in court just because you can. And Issue 1, in my opinion, takes advantage of regular people in court, and it's people doing it just because they can, because they don't want to be held accountable when they do something wrong.
We're talking with Jerry Cox of the Family Council. He's announced that next Wednesday is going to start a 30-city tour where he's going to be getting the word out about why Issue 1 is bad and why the people of Arkansas need to reject it and vote against it on November 6th. Jerry, while I have you, I'd like for you to talk about another aspect of Issue 1. It allows the legislature to blur the line of separation of powers and set rules of evidence for a courtroom. Now, you have been down there for a very long time, and you have seen how quickly some piece of language can get slipped into this legislation or that legislation. So, how trusting are you that they won't use their ability to set rules of evidence because some special interest influenced them to put a piece of language somewhere?
Paul, they already tried it back in 2003. And you're right, I've been out there a long time, almost 30 years. I've seen a lot. Back in 2003, the nursing homes tried to get their own version of tort reform pushed through the legislature, and they went so far as to try to get the legislature to pass a law that says state inspection reports of nursing homes could not be used as evidence in an abuse case against when an old person has been hurt in a nursing home. They tried to say that past instances of abuse or neglect couldn't be talked about in the current lawsuit that was being filed. So they could, injure half a dozen more people, kill them, lead to their death, and you can't talk about that. That's the kind of shenanigans that the nursing homes tried back in 2003. Those same nursing home owners are still there. I see people out there, and we're kidding ourselves if we think that they're not going to come in if Issue 1 passes and tell the legislature, whisper in their ear how to pass laws determining what kind of evidence can be introduced if you have a grievance against the nursing home and take them to court. And so the cap, in some ways, the cap on damages could become irrelevant if they so restrict the evidence. You'll never even get to the courthouse because you won't have enough evidence to mount a lawsuit when one of these big outfits does something bad to a member of your family or to you. And so that's a hidden dagger that's in Issue 1 that most people don't talk about, but it is extremely dangerous and could be the worst thing about Issue 1.
So, Jerry, we're out of time. Can you tell us, if people want to be at these events in the different cities, people are listening all across the state, where can they find the schedule of where you're going to be?
Go online to voteagainstissue1.com, voteagainstissue1.com, and the schedule should be on that website. We're going to cover 30 cities. We start next week. We wrap it up on the 16th down in Nashville, Arkansas. And so if people want to come and get a free breakfast or a free lunch and hear us talk about Issue 1, or just come and say, attaboy, glad you're doing this, we'd love to see you face-to-face.
All right, Jerry Cox, I appreciate it as always. Good luck to you, and we'll do this again soon.
Thanks.
All righty. Jerry Cox, everybody, from the Family Council. All right, so we're going to take a break. We're going to reset. Up at Conduit News, they've got a report on what happened yesterday at the Tax Reform Task Force. We'll give you that story when we come back in just a moment. Being with us today, again, starting the beginning of your week with us here at the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Please welcome back to the program. He's the co-founder of the Media Equality Project and editor-in-chief of MediaEqualizer.com. We've got Mr. Brian Maloney back with us. Brian, good morning to you, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
So on Friday, I was prepping for our interview, Brian, and we were going to talk a little bit about, Dianne Feinstein and Brett Kavanaugh and, this letter that she's been sitting on since June and everything else. And I know we're still going to talk about that, but we've had some new developments because the accuser is now accusing the nominee for the Supreme Court, Brett Kavanaugh, of sexual misconduct. What do you make of this?
Well, I do think that you hit the correct point first there, and that is, what was Dianne Feinstein doing sitting on this thing? So now we've got this situation where, we can't proceed with this until this has been investigated. Well, Feinstein has had this for months.
Do you need conservative legislation killed?
Or do you need policies enacted that ensure government growth?
Then you need to get
nephewed. Hi, I'm nephew number 1 of uncle, nephew, and nephew, attorneys at law. I'm not a lawyer, but I am a senator.
And I'm nephew number 2, and I am a lawyer and also a senator.
Are you the victim of a recent accident in which the voters in your community mistakenly elected a limited government conservative who is now actually implementing the ideas he or she campaigned on?
That's right, nephew number 1. Don't be a victim of democratic elections any longer. At Uncle, Nephew, and Nephew, we are committed to killing limited government legislation and promoting bills that increase the size of government by using any tool at our disposal.
Because sometimes the truth of the matter is, principles get in the way of pragmatism.
Just listen to some of our great testimonials.
Ever since I've been using the nephews, all my special interests have been served. As long as you make sure your contract says lobbying services are prohibited, then the legal services of uncle, nephew, and nephew are legal. Trust me, put the nephews on them.
It came out of nowhere. I was blindsided last election cycle when my well-funded and paid-for politician lost to some grassroots limited government voters. But then I hired the nephews, and they killed all the conservative policies the voters wanted. I got nephewed.
I got nephewed too, and so can you. Uncle, nephew, and nephew will accept compensation via campaign contributions. Put the nephews on them.
PHP Parody. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
ConduitNews.com reporting that the tax task force meeting. Headline here: Arkansas now ranks 46th in Business Tax Climate Index. The Arkansas Tax Task Force met again Wednesday to discuss the impact of proposed tax reform from their report they issued last month. A presentation from the Tax Foundation's Nicole Keating revealed that Arkansas had fallen 3 spots to 46th overall on the Business Tax Climate Index. That places Arkansas in the bottom 5 in the country and last among Republican states. The only states Arkansas beat on the index were Connecticut, New York, California, and New Jersey. Keating did emphasize that the reforms that the tax task force is currently proposing is not reflected in those numbers, and if passed, would be reflected next year. Keating analyzed the current proposals for tax reform from the tax task force's report issued last month. Under option A, the drop in individual income tax, they would drop it down, individual income tax down to a top rate of 6%. Under the DF&A plan, the top rate would drop down to 6.5%, then to 5.9% under a phased-in plan. Applying those two plans to the business tax index, Arkansas would move back up to 43rd overall under the DF&A plan and 45th overall under the Option A plan. Still got a long way to go, right? With these recommendations. They're not going to make much of a difference in terms of the ranking of us to other states. Now, I'll tell you why that is. You want to know why that is? It's very, very simple. They can tweak the tax code all they want, and they can even reduce the amount of revenue the government gets all they want. But until you start making significant dents in the fact that it takes $8,000 per person to run our government here in Arkansas, when it takes $5,000 per person to run Texas or Oklahoma or the states around us, when you start to realize the per capita impact on that, you realize we've got a giant, humongous government, and there's a lot of that money that's going to fund this giant government that needs to have never gone to the government in the first place. And it's going to take somebody very bold to get our number of almost $8,000 per person to run our government down to a competitive level of about $5,000 per person to run our government. If you just did that, like if you could just, genie that up and, make a wish and boom, then all of a sudden I think Arkansas, as a result of that, would be far more competitive in terms of our business tax climate because you'd have more money in the hands of business owners. I know that sounds simple, but that's because it is, just based on that measurement. It's much more complicated when you start to say, okay, well, who wants to put up with the mainstream media making it seem like our cuts are going to be the end of the world? Who has the boldness to be able to put up with that and deflate their bogus arguments because they're pro-government leftists? In the afternoon session, Conduit News reports the task force head, the task force heard more from Nicole Keating from the Tax Foundation. She presented on the packages of proposed reforms in the task force's report and how passing those would improve the business climate index for Arkansas. Under the largest tax cut of over $250 million, Arkansas would improve from 46th in the nation to 42nd on the Tax Foundation's Business Climate Index. Fielding questions on why no huge changes, Keating pointed to the lack of reform proposed regarding sales taxes. Discussion on tax triggers versus phased-in tax cuts were also discussed with Keating and DFNA officials. She commented, quote, "You are kind of nibbling around the edges," end quote. The afternoon session did draw a quote from task force co-chair Lane Jean that drew interest. Jean stated, quote, "We do not know the increase in Medicaid or what the increase in Medicaid will be, but it will likely be substantial if we do not have savings in government somewhere down the line. I don't see how we could do this," end quote. This seemed to underscore some possible concern on large tax cuts and their impact on state budgets. Stop. I have said since these reports or proposals started coming out, you can get a tax task force to recommend something conservative or recommend a net decrease in revenue to the state. Apparently that can be done. It's a long way away from going down into one of those committee tables and actually getting it passed. Senator Alan Clark presented first at the tax task force on his proposed legislation for eliminating sales tax paid on items that are donated. He spoke about how under the current law, it would be more beneficial for him to take unused inventory to the landfill rather than donate it to local charities because he would then have to pay the sales tax on the value of that donation. Clark commented that he had been trying to pass this for 6 years. The most recent estimated revenue impact would be a loss of around $1.6 million to the state. The tax task force will meet again tomorrow and will be discussing tax credits. So they're meeting today. That's up at conduitnews.com. We'll be back with Dan Perkins, going to talk Judge Kavanaugh here in just a moment.
And so now conveniently she drops this at the 11th hour when it can do the most political damage. And look, what Democrats are trying to do here is stall the vote until after the November election. That way they can win control of the U.S. Senate, win control of Congress, and then scuttle this whole thing, and then Trump will never get anyone he wants confirmed. So that's what all this is about, is trickery. So, am I going to be able to sit here and say that this didn't happen 35 years ago in high school or whatever? No. But, I mean, if you're able to look at this and not feel like it's become a theater of the absurd, I mean, that's exactly what it is. It's absolutely ridiculous what's going on.
Yeah, you are exactly right. I also think that there's probably some fundraising to some of this. I know a couple of weeks ago up at MediaEqualizer.com, back when Cory Booker was having his grandstanding Spartacus moment, they were sending out emails fundraising, trying to, they want to run for president, some of these people.
Oh, absolutely. There's no question that all this has been an opportunity for, seeing which Democrat looks strongest going into 2020. So there's that. But I just think that Feinstein, I mean, she has no excuse, for sitting on something for 3 months and then dropping it when it's politically timed to this extent. So, but, I mean, the bottom line is that Kavanaugh has now had his reputation smeared. I don't know why anybody would ever want to be on the Supreme Court, run for president, run for office, do anything anymore, because it's all about trickery, and it's all about sliming people at the worst possible moment. And, I mean, think about it, we're actually now seriously talking about what Kavanaugh may or may not have done in high school. I mean, high school. So, I mean, if you can look at this and not shake your head in disbelief, I think we're in a very, very sad state of affairs.
No, there's no doubt that we are. So this is a delay tactic. I agree with you. That does sound right. They're trying to delay this because they know if they can torpedo his nomination, it's going to be a while before Donald Trump gets another one. It will be after the election, but before there's another nomination. What are your thoughts on this, Brian Maloney, in terms of, the vote, I believe, is scheduled for Thursday. You have one Republican, Jeff Flake, saying we don't need to vote, we need to delay it. What do you think? Or do you think they'll go ahead and stand firm? The White House, as of last night, was standing firm by Kavanaugh's denials, and they were going to move forward. What's Chuck Grassley going to do? What are you hearing?
Well, I think, notice how it is one of the most liberal Republicans in the U.S. Senate, Jeff Flake, one who's also on his way out the door, who was the first to jump out and say we need to delay this.
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, folks, the phone number to call or text, 870-275-9799. Welcome back. We also are taking your comments with the Facebook Live video, facebook.com/Conduit News. Things are gearing up towards a fever pitch. You had Senator Jeff Snowflake trashing Donald Trump on the Senate floor yesterday, but still saying he would keep an open mind about the hearings today, where Christine Blasey Ford going to be testifying against these, talking about her allegations. You have Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh also going to testify to refute them. The only thing I would agree with Jeff Snowflake is that it is a powder keg. It's incredible right now what's going on. The hearings are going to start at 9:45 Eastern. For those of you listening across the state of Arkansas, it's going to be 8:45 our time. And everybody's going to be tuned in. There's a lot of accusations out there swirling. And we have attorneys who are Democrats now who are out there saying that Judge Kavanaugh does not have the presumption of innocence. I mean, up is down, black is white. I mean, everything is the opposite of what it should be because the ends justify the means, and it's very, very, very discouraging. Here to talk more about this, we have political contributor to thedailycaller.com, Clash Daily, LifeZet, Newsmax, Mr. Dan Perkins. Dan, welcome back to the program, sir.
Good morning, and thank you for having me on.
Yes, sir. So what do you know? What's the latest about all of this, and what's your opinion of it?
The latest is I was on an airplane that landed here in Fort Myers at 1:30 this morning, and I saw a release where there are two men who've come forward and said that Ms. Ford is mistaken. It was these two men who were involved, not Judge Kavanaugh.
Really? I have
yes.
I have not seen that report. So you say two.
Well, can you imagine why the mainstream media would report that?
Yeah, I can, because that would totally undo everything.
Exactly. That's how major this announcement is that you have two men who have come forward and said that she's mistaken about the judge and Mr. Judge. In fact, they were the two gentlemen that were involved in the incident with her. Now, she can still come in and testify, and even Judge Kavanaugh, when he did his interview earlier this week on Fox News, he says he's not saying that she wasn't assaulted. It just wasn't him. These two gentlemen who came up just late last night, I don't know when they indicated, but it was I saw it on the news last night on Drudge. They said that they were the two gentlemen responsible. So she can certainly testify about her incident, but now that there are corroborating witnesses that says it wasn't in fact Judge Kavanaugh or Mr. Judge, it was in fact them. It's an interesting situation, because where does the committee go? I know that they have the information. So if they have the information, are they going to permit her to testify? Are they going to require the two gentlemen to testify? And my guess is probably not, because they've got a sworn affidavit. The statute of limitations has run out, so they really can't be charged. But I suspect that Chairman Grassley is to be as accommodative as possible, will allow her to testify. But now I think that the whole train of questioning is going to change, in that we now have two other people who are refuting what she said, because they're admitting that they're the ones that did it.
I'm telling you, there's a big development here, and now you kind of wonder, is she going to testify at all? I do see this. We have even the Daily Beast reporting it, the Washington Examiner headline: 2 men claiming to be the one involved in the Ford encounter, not Kavanaugh. They've been interviewed by the Senate. This came out, I guess, at 12:26 this morning, and this would be.
I was landing.
Yeah, this would be big news. Hey, so we're talking with Dan Perkins. So what about these other accusers, and what do you think about this all coming out at the last minute? I mean, it's pretty clear. I mean, President Trump was clear, and he calls this a con job. That you can just have any accusation thrown out there, and it has to be believed. And we're expected to believe, by the way, that this has nothing to do with politics. That's the only way. To give them the benefit of the doubt that they're asking is to I'm supposed to believe that this isn't politically motivated at all.
Right. I would say that's a great question, by the way, and an important question. I would say to you. Yesterday, I'm not in front of my computer, but if you are, you could probably verify it. Yesterday, Chuck Schumer, the minority leader of the Senate, said, because of the accusations, Judge Kavanaugh should withdraw. Now, I want to go back, because it's such a very, very important statement, because it attacks the Constitution. The Constitution, under due process, says that an accused is entitled to hear the charges from the person that is accusing them and to respond to them. So when you in your news break, we heard the discussion about some attorney saying that Judge Kavanaugh is not entitled to due process. Every citizen of this country, under the Constitution, is entitled to due process. But what the Democrats are saying, the mere fact that an accusation was made, whether it was true or not, whether it was proven or not, Judge Kavanaugh should recuse himself from his nomination at the court. That's fundamentally wrong. Because if We can simply accuse a person and force them out of office or force them from being able to be considered for another office without a right to defend themselves, then we're in serious trouble as a nation.
What do you think is going to happen? What are they going to do if the Republicans hold firm and they confirm Judge Brett Kavanaugh? What do you think that they're going to do? We know what the media is going to say. Is there a possibility of violence, maybe another Steve Scalise tragedy?
That's been on the table long before the Kavanaugh situation. The level of violence, we saw what happened to Senator Cruz this week at a Washington, D.C. restaurant with his wife, who was forced to leave the restaurant, and people were in his face. That could have easily turned into even something more violent. There was no metal detector coming in the restaurant. Those protesters could have had a gun, could have shot him. So that's a reality of what's going on. This is what if I were Chairman Grassley, now that he knows about the two gentlemen who have confessed to the deed, it seems to me that what he needs to say in his opening statement is that we have sworn affidavits that what Miss Ford said happened. She just happened to get the people wrong. And so what I think what he should probably do is allow her to testify, but the prosecutor who's going to examine her is going to use the admission by the two gentlemen. And what he's going to do is turn it into an opportunity to talk about violence against women, but not using Judge Kavanaugh, and not even necessarily disclosing the two gentlemen, but allow her to have her say.
Yeah.
But when she starts anytime mentioning Judge Kavanaugh, then the prosecutor should step in and say, "No, ma'am, that's not true." And what really changes things is that if Chairman Grassley introduces the sworn affidavits of the two men before the Democrats get to question her, this is now has to change their line of question. Because if they try and attack Judge Kavanaugh, I am guessing that or hoping that the chairman, Charles Grassley, will say, no, that's not, we can't do that. That's not no longer a valid assumption. So it's going to put, if anybody, it's going to put the Democrats in a very defensive position, because it's all been she said, but now we have two collaborating witnesses who are admitting that they were the ones that did the attack, not Judge Kavanaugh or Mr. Judge. And it puts everybody in a massive role reversal, because if they bring doubt about, not about the attack, I don't think they want to do that, but if they bring doubt about whether it was Judge Kavanaugh, then the other two subsequent witnesses who are on much shakier ground than what Ms. Kavanaugh was, their credibility diminishes rapidly.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah. I guess I have a question here about those other two. About those other two witnesses. So we're just now finding out. These articles are from the 27th, early this morning, that two men have come forward, and they say that they're the ones that assaulted Christine Blasey Ford, and it wasn't Brett Kavanaugh,
or Judge,
or Mark Judge. And so my question is this: how long has the Senate Judiciary Committee known this? And if they've known it for a few days, if they've known it for at least a couple of days, the conspiracy theorist in me is saying, well, if the Democrats knew that they have, these witnesses who've come forward saying it was them and not Judge Kavanaugh, then all of a sudden we've got more women coming out. It's kind of like, well, we've got to keep the accusation alive at that point. I know that's speculation, but that's my gut reaction here.
Well, it's a free. At least it wasn't a free country the last time I checked. Although it was under attack for what they were doing. You're allowed to speculate whatever you want. I wouldn't. I don't know yet, because of any of the information that I saw when I landed last night. That the two gentlemen, I don't know when they came forward to the Senate committee. I also don't know whether or not anybody on the Democratic side was represented when these two gentlemen gave their sworn affidavit. So I don't know the time frame. So it would be inappropriate for me to speculate how long they've known. We'll ultimately find out.
Well,
very quickly.
And the only reason I say that is because, boy, wouldn't that be a very interesting response? If Dianne Feinstein is going to sit on a letter for months and not do anything and wait till the 11th hour to try to torpedo this and keep a solid 5-4 conservative court from being a reality, then why shouldn't Chuck Grassley in the Judiciary Committee also know a few days ago, or maybe even a week ago, because Christine Blasey Ford, was going to testify, then she's not going to testify, and everything else. Right. And why wouldn't they sit on the letter and wait until the political theater happens, the show starts, and then here's a big loss, Democrats. I mean, you guys have jumped to the conclusion, you've disparaged somebody and a man and his family and everything else. So I and then the nomination would go through without a hitch. So again, blatant speculation on my part, but it does seem that it's at least a possibility. So.
Oh, I would not argue that point with you at all. What I do think is important, and I'm not saying that what you're suggesting is not important. What I do think is important is that your listeners understand that what happened here was the whole Democratic approach was to get Judge Kavanaugh to recuse himself. When I quoted you Chuck Schumer accusation, the point here is that the 40-year history of the operation of the Democratic Party in Washington, D.C. is that whether the Republicans are willing to admit it or not, the Democratic Party was in charge. Look at what they did to Bush 41. Look what they did to Bush 43, in attacking and demeaning them as a person and as president of the United States. So that the playbook, the Democratic playbook, is you accuse and you accuse and you accuse and you put more and more pressure till they reach the point when the Republicans capitulate, walk away, go hide, run away in a corner. And that's been the strategy. And if you look back, you'll see it happen time and time again. That changed when Donald Trump became president, because Donald Trump said no more. And when he said no more, that meant that he was going to fight them tooth and nail and call them out. And what happened here is that the Democratic strategy was to find these people for the sole purpose of understanding that the statute of limitations is gone. There's no way they can be prosecuted. But the whole purpose was to defeat him by getting him to follow the Democratic playbook and resign or recuse himself. That's how they won. That's how they intended to win. And when Schumer said yesterday he shouldn't serve because of accusations, then that says that's exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to intimidate him to recuse himself based on intimidation. And now they've got a problem, because now they have people who said, no, it was really us. It wasn't Judge Kavanaugh or Mr. Judge. And so that turns everything around. I mean, I don't know how the Democrats, because if the Democrats don't believe the two men, they got a problem.
Well, they're going to look like conspiracy theorists at that point. I mean, they're going to look like they've got sour grapes.
Yes, absolutely.
I think Go ahead.
I just want to say, I think the Democrats are now really saying, "What in the hell are we going to do?"
Yeah,
because our the fact that Donald Trump continued to support him, Kavanaugh kept saying, "No, it's not me," I'm not denying whether or not these women were attacked, but it wasn't me. Now he's got people saying, it wasn't him. The strategy of intimidation or resignation is not going to work with Judge Kavanaugh. So there will be no asterisk, as some pundits have said. There will be people who've opened their mouth, like the senator from Hawaii, who said that Judge Kavanaugh is not entitled to due process. The people who said that he raped her are now in a very difficult position. Whether it's Feinstein, whether it's Gillibrand from New York, Kamala Harris out of California, all those people who have come out and given these outrageous pronouncements that he was a rapist and he assaulted her are now in a situation where, how do they walk it back?
Yeah.
Do they say, well, we don't believe them, or we don't think it's? If you believed her, and they're willing to admit under oath before Congress that it was in fact them, not the judge, the Democrats are in a very deep hole.
Yeah.
And their whole hope of this being the turn for the midterm elections collapses.
Yeah, it blows up in their face. It really does. And I think the left's going to throw a huge temper tantrum regardless, because, truth doesn't seem to matter in a lot of respects. And you had the president at the press conference say yesterday, look, listen, this is a terrible precedent because, I mean, if you can just throw accusations out and you're guilty until proven innocent, then, I'm going to have other nominations. I'm going to have other people I'm going to appoint to jobs, and this is now the Democrats' tactic. He said it's got to stop, and I think that's why the president has been so firm on this. Folks, we've been talking with Dan Perkins. He's a political analyst, and he just informed us of the news that did develop this morning where you have the Judiciary Committee heard from two men that are not Kavanaugh or this Mark Judge guy who are claiming they're the ones that were involved with the incident with Christine Blasey Ford. So coming up at 8:45, I guess in about an hour, the committee's going to start and convene, and we'll see what happens. It maybe fireworks there. And Dan Perkins, I'll give you the last word, sir.
There's a possibility. The Democrats do not want this to go forward. There's a possibility that Ms. Ford doesn't testify.
Because it would just look so bad. Yeah, I think you're right. And the media will probably say, well, it's because Chuck Grassley wasn't accommodating enough. But let's hope that the truth gets out there. And Dan, I appreciate it. He's a political commentator, dailycaller.com, Clash Daily, LifeSet, Newsmax, The Hill. Also, folks, don't forget to check out Dan's book. We've had him on before to talk about the Brotherhood of the Red Nile, a terrorist perspective. It's actually a series of books. So check that out, available at Amazon.com. Dan, I appreciate it, sir, and you have a great morning.
Thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
All righty. Folks, this is Conduit News Radio. We'll be back in just a moment.
If you believe the Second Amendment protects your right to defend your home with a firearm, where do you turn if the government confiscates your gun? To the courthouse. The Founding Fathers created your Seventh Amendment right to a civil jury to protect your freedoms. The courthouse is where you fight the overreaching hand of government. And the Brad Hendricks Law Firm is where the fight starts. Call the Brad Hendricks Law Firm at 501-221-0444. The Brad Hendricks Law Firm in Little Rock, standing ready using the Seventh Amendment to protect your Second Amendment rights.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
And so now, conveniently, she drops this at the 11th hour when it can do the most political damage. And look, what Democrats are trying to do here is stall the vote until after the November election. That way they can win control of the U.S. Senate, win control of Congress, and then scuttle this whole thing. And then Trump will never get anyone he wants confirmed. So that's what all this is about, is trickery. So, am I going to be able to sit here and say that this didn't happen 35 years ago in high school or whatever? No. But, I mean, if you're able to look at this and not feel like it's become a theater of the absurd, I mean, that's exactly what it is. It's absolutely ridiculous what's going on.
Yeah, you are exactly right. I also think that there's probably some fundraising to some of this. I know a couple of weeks ago up at MediaEqualizer.com, back when Cory Booker
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Conduit. Hey, Conduit for Action is going to be in Arkansas County tonight. The Republican committee down in Arkansas County, 6 o'clock for a presentation. You can go to the Bullpen Restaurant. That's going to be in DeWitt, and make sure that you're there. I mean, those of you who are listening in Arkansas County, we appreciate listening on KWAK. That's KWAC, 1240 AM and 102.7 FM out of Stuttgart. Conduit for Action going to be there in Arkansas County, so check them out. I would imagine the Republican Party of Arkansas, of Arkansas County would welcome anybody that would want to come to the event and check out what the party's about, as well as the speaker. Mr. Josh Waters will be down there, and then again, that is Conduit for Action. So we're excited about that. Let's see, what else do we have here? Tomorrow, what is today? Say Thursday, so tomorrow in the program is Johnny Cash Friday. We should have a great show for you. I understand State Representative Josh Miller is going to be on the program tomorrow, so that'll be interesting. Also, I understand there's a new practice going around the Marble Palace at the Capitol. It's a joke, but I think there's a new practice that a little bird told me that, some of these legislators like Joe Jett and Jim Hendren and Charlie Collins, some people are just walking up to them and asking them for money now. Have you heard about this? Because of the whole loan scandal. Because people are, legislators are loaning folks, $12,500 or $16,000 or $4,000. I mean, so a lot of times, if you want, I would encourage you guys, if any lobbyists or any, I don't know, I think they're welcoming the jokes at this point. You just go up to Jim Hendren or go up to Charlie Collins or go up to Joe Jett and be like, hey, can I have some money? Can I have a zero interest loan? Hey, by the way, has anyone even thought about the fact that when Jake Files went to Jim Hendren and asked for the $4,000, or rather, when Jake Files, now convicted felon, went to Bart Hester to go ask Jim Hendren for the $4,000 so that he could cover some hot checks, do you think that Jim Hendren ever thought to himself, Jake, you live in a $1.5 million mansion. What do you need $4,000 for? Maybe you should downsize to, I don't know, maybe downsize to $1 million home, or maybe downsize to a $500,000 home. Maybe then you wouldn't need to be borrowing $4,000 from me. Also, yeah, remember the mansion he lived in. Remember the hedges, the 2 Fs? Yeah, maybe. Oh, folks, we'll see you tomorrow. Arkansas, be safe.